You signed up when you were 16, is that right?
Yeah. I was not a very good student. And I was raised during the Depression. And my future, the most I could have ever become, that I was not a good student, I was not overly intelligent, the most I could have ever become I would have been very successful if I could have been a clerk in a grocery store, because I was a delivery boy for a grocery store starting at age 13. So when World War II started, this was an escape for me. This was an outlet, opportunity to see the world, to have some adventure, and perhaps to be somebody. And we all children had that idea. So I enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor. I joined my regiment in New York, 16th Infantry, 1st Division, in April of 42. We went to Europe. We went to England in August of 40, for the whole 1st Infantry Division. We loaded up on the Queen Mary on August the 2nd, 1942, and we went to Scotland.
So had you done any training up to this point?
Oh, yes. We had been constantly training, taking invasion maneuvers, and, of course, field training, and I was in a machine gun company. So we got from Scotland down to England by train to a place called Tidworth Barracks. Perhaps if you ever get to go to England, Tidworth Barracks is about 60 miles northeast of London, and it's near Stonehenge. So anyone who goes to England, of course, should go to Stonehenge.
Absolutely.
And this is where I got my first London. So already the world is exciting, you know. I'm really seeing something. I'm 17 years old by now.
How did you manage to, did you have to get a special waiver or something to get in?
No, I lied, which is not a very bad vocation. It'll get you a lot of women, it'll get you money, it'll get a lot of things in life, if you are a good liar. So, those people who are proficient in being untruthful, from politicians to presidents down to street sweepers. Good liars are unique people. And I was a good liar, and I went into the recruiting office, and they asked me how old I was. I said 18. And the sergeant said, "You don't look 18. He said, "Here, take these papers and go get your parents' permission, and that way, if they agree, we'll enlist you." So I went up on Market Square. Used to be different than what it is now. They used to really have baskets of fruit and potatoes, and farmers came in on Market up there, and bums hung out there. And I still think homeless people hang out. I'm not sure. But I went to Markets, right out of the recruiting office was very close to Market Square. I went out there and there was some bum. I asked him, and he said, "What are you going to do?" And who to sign? You know, he's some drunk. And he said, "I'll sign them if you promise to kill a Jap for me. I'll never forget." And I said, "Okay, I'll kill a Jap." I never got close to a Jap. But anyway, I joined a very, very good infantry regiment and a very good infantry division, the Big Red One. And I stayed with the Big Red One. Well, let's get back to England.
Okay.
We went down to Tidworth Barracks, but we only stayed there for a few weeks. And we went to Scotland, back up to Scotland, and took maneuvers.
What does that mean? What does that mean? What were you doing when you say invasion maneuvers?
Well, we would go out on a big ship. We lived on a ship. Oh, and we'd climb down these rope that hung down the side of the ship and get into small Higgins boats. Higgins boat is what they call an LCBPT, Landing Craft Depot and Tank, is what it was called. Well, later they just called it a Higgins boat, an assault boat. We carried 42 people on the boat. It was commanded by a sailor, coxswain, but he was really in charge of it. From the time you got on that boat until you hit land, you did not tell him what to do. I don't care what your rank was. So we would go in and we'd hit land and go in on maneuver, you know. And one of the requirements was we could not eat, sleep, or smoke for 48 hours.
Prior?
No, from the time we hit land. Once we hit land. Well, we did this for, I would say most of September of 42. And then part of October, we maneuvered against a British regiment of the Black Watch regiment, if you've ever heard of the Black Watch regiment. We maneuvered against them. And later in life, my regiment was again close to the Black Watch regiment in Germany. They were on occupation duty, and we were on occupation duty. And I was sergeant major of the regiment, and we got together again, and recall all these past things. But anyway, we one night the boat just slipped out, and we were on our way to Africa. And we could tell by the sun that we were going southeast. They won't tell you anything. And I think the name of the boat we were on was Warwick Castle, HMS Warwick Castle. I think that was the name of the boat. It's been 50-something years ago. Then with a convoy coming from the States and went through the Straits of Gibraltar. Now we know where we're at. When we go through the Straits of Gibraltar, there's only one Straits of Gibraltar. You can't miss it. And my regiment, the 16th Infantry, was supposed to land at a place called Arzu, which is just east of Oran in Africa. We were supposed to land at 1 o'clock, and we did. We landed about 1 o'clock in the morning, and of course, they taught us French on the boat going over. They taught us French, and the French they taught us is "Je suis ami, je suis américain." I am a friend, I'm an American. This is all we know. And the reason for that is when the Germans took over France, the French fleet escaped from France and went to Oran, Africa. And the British battleship Rodney and a few other big battleships went into Oran and tried to sink the French fleet. And there was a lot of casualties. And so the higher headquarters knew that they'd be very receptive to English troops landing. So that's why they made us learn this. And we had an American flag on our arm. And we kept hollering, "Je suis ami, je suis américain." And we spoke good French, So we landed. And of course, the 18th Infantry, which was just to the right of us, if I'm going too fast, stop me. But just to the right of us, as you look south, here is Oran, here is a little town called St. Lo, and here is St. Lou, and here is Arzu, where we land. We land Arzu. And we're going to go deep inland and come around and come in behind Oran. The 18th Infantry, which was a sister regiment in the 1st Division, landed at St. Lou and was supposed to go directly into Oran. And the 26th Infantry, 3rd Regiment of the 1st Division, landed to the right of Oran and was coming in from the west. So it was a two-pincher with the 16th coming into the rear. And on paper, it probably looked good. And it was quite successful. We got shot at, and we did some shooting. We had little carts to pull our machine guns in. And whoever invented these little carts, pull them in sand, because they just sunk up in sand. A machine gun, a heavy water-cooled machine gun, which is what I was reading, weighs about 96 pounds, the tripod and gun itself, and water and water jackets.
Was that your responsibility, the machine gun?
Yes, I was the gunner, and I was to carry the tripod when we walked. But we put them on these little carts, so when we started pulling, it was harder to pull them there. So we moved straight inland, and we got to a little town called Le Grand. Now, we landed at 1 o'clock in the morning, and by that evening, we were at a little town called Le Grand.
What was it, so how long did it take you, how long were you on the Higgins Assault boats when you landed, from the time that how long were you on those actual assault boats, would you say?
From ship, by the time we hit land, we probably traveled 10 miles in probably 30, 35, 40 minutes, no more. But we received no fire. No one shot us, no. Now, on the other hand, the 1st Armored Division, which was part of the invading force, had an Armored Infantry Regiment. The 13th Infantry Regiment was part of the 1st Armored Division, And one of his battalions was on a destroyer that was supposed to go right into the dock, land, jump out, and assault a fort. Well, they got hell knocked out of them. They didn't. The destroyer, as soon as it come into the harbor, they opened fire on it and just eat those people up. It was a very stupid plan. But we Americans at that time, we were so inexperienced. We were taught by the school at Fort Benning, which had a very simple philosophy of shoot, one part of you shoot and the other part of you maneuver around and take the objective. Well, that all sounds good. But when you don't have anything to maneuver around when they're getting shot at, what the hell do you do? You know? Yeah. So it's a problem. But that was the tactical philosophy of the American Army at that time. It didn't work. Anyway, we got to Legrand the first evening, and I laid down, and I'll never forget it. Now, you remember, our clothing consisted of OD trousers, OD shirt, field jacket, cartridge belt, and pistol, and all of this, and steel helmet. And we had shoes with leggings. We didn't have boots at that time. We had leggings. And that evening, we come up to a stone wall overlooking this little town of Legrand. And of course, the rifle troops were patrolling down into the town, but machine guns, weapons troops, I lived through the war. I was in a weapons company. Had I been in a rifle company, I'd have been killed very quick.
Why do you say that? Because
87% of all casualties are in rifle companies. 87% of all casualties. Now, take away from that the artillery, the armor, the Air Force, the quartermaster, whatever else you have, and you can see who gets killed in wars. 87% of your casualties are in rifle companies. I was in a machine gun company. That's why I lived. One company in my regiment, I company of the 16th Infantry, started out with 168 men. America with 168. At the end of the war, they had 1,893 replacements. One company, commanded by a man, when I was attached to it, it was commanded by a man named Captain Richmond, an extremely fine, courageous soldier. But that's an example. My company, weapons company, we had maybe 142 in those days. At the end of the war, I would say we maybe had 600 replacements come out. There was 8 of us that was left for D-Day.
From the original?
Yeah, they had gone through that consistently. Then after D-Day, it started coming down because at the end of the war, there was only 2 of us that was left. But this is normal. This is normal combat irritation. Your rifle troops, they suffer the worst inhumane living conditions, the worst treatment, the worst of everything is your rifle troops. Of course, us uneducated, dumb Southerners make very good rifle soldiers. And I'll tell you why, because we were used to hardship. We were repression. We knew what it was to be hungry. We knew what it was to work without food and be tired. And so when these conditions were endured, the Southern rifleman, it was not that big a thing to him. He had done this at home, you know. But back to the story.
Well, that's a good point. I wonder, that's interested in the training, what you think about Mr. Franklin, your training, like, as far as, the effectiveness, I guess, of your training.
The what?
How effective it was. You talked some about tactics earlier, and as far as your training's involved, what would you say a typical day of training, even before, say, you got to Scotland in the very beginning was like? I'm kind of interested in just sort of that as well.
The Army runs on a cycle, on a yearly cycle. They start out with individual training. And individual training is, if you're a rifleman, you go to the range and you qualify with a rifle on the range. Then you have squad. 12 riflemen make one squad. Then you have squad tactics. What does a squad do? You have at that time they had an Alpha, Bravo, Charlie team and a rifle squad. The Alpha team was 2 men, and they were the point, the scouts. The Bravo team was the base. Those people were the ones who laid down and put a base of fire on the enemy. And your Charlie team are the ones who maneuvered around. And this was part of the tactics of a rifle squad.
Did somebody assign you to, did you sort of choose, or did somebody say, okay, you're going to be Alpha, you're going to be...
Oh, well, you had a squad leader. You had a squad leader who at that time was only a corporal. Later he became a sergeant. You had a squad leader. The commander of the Alpha team, the recon team, was actually the assistant squad leader. Okay, so he fulfilled one mission, but if the squad leader got killed, he became the squad leader, and he would appoint someone else to be the point. It's more technical than people think. The individual of a rifle soldier. Now, the individual duties, you've got 4 squads, make a platoon. And the platoon operates on the same philosophy. Scouts to encounter the enemy, a base of fire, and a maneuvering element. Now, 4 platoons make a company. Again, the same basic principle. Scouts find out where the enemy is, how strong he is, to fire on the enemy, and your maneuvering element. Now, but once you get up to company level, now we introduce the machine gun platoon that is attached to your company, the mortar platoon that is part of your company that can lay fire on this objective, and the machine gun platoon that can fire directly at it. So it gets a little bigger. So in the beginning of the year, you start out with individual training, then squad training, then platoon training, then company training, then battalion training, and then regimental combat team training. It's all the same principle. Recon and find the enemy. Lay down a base of fire to pin him down, and maneuver in order to capture. All from individual squad, but I'll bring up a point here. You hear often people say that he is a good leader. Mm-hmm. General so-and-so. Yeah. You have 2 leaders in the Army. You have the squad leader and the platoon leader. They lead. Everybody else commands. They tell other people what to do. But a squad leader are your only 2 leaders in the Army. A general is not a leader. He's a business administrative man who tells other people what to do. It's like you running an office, or like Dr. Johnson running a course over there. He says, well, Professor so-and-so, you take that, and Professor so-and-so, you take that. The same way with a general in the Army. They are business administrative people.
So you guys, you wouldn't look at them as leaders.
Absolutely not.
Builds them up and calls them these big wartime leaders.
Although this does not detract from the fact that they are very oftentimes courageous and good people. But they are just not leaders. That's a distinction.
That's an excellent distinction.
So, and most people don't realize this. Later, you're major of the regiment, and I had a colonel. Well, I had many colonels, of course. Then I could really see what duties a regimental commander had. And very little of his duties required leadership. Most of his duties required decision-making relative to the careers of junior officers. His duties really consistent. As far as him being a leader, very few of them. They were leaders when they had a squad or when they had a platoon. But once they graduated to a company, once they become a captain, they're now commanders. They're no longer leaders. I hope that don't throw you off.
Not at all. No, this is excellent. That's very much what I'm interested in. What would you say if you go all the way back just to the very the first month when they're doing that individual training? What was that like? Because you've gone from some civilian life. You were in high school, and then you've got that. Is it a sudden shock to the system, or is it? What was that like? How did you feel? I guess
the Army, these business people in Washington, set up a system whereby they could take a person out of civilian life and put him into a training center and give him basic training. And this consisted of dehumanizing you to no longer think as an individual. You now become part of a team. And this is overemphasized from the first day you get there. If you do, your whole squad suffers for it. And if the squad does something wrong, the whole platoon suffers. But they start off by cutting off your hair, by keeping you at attention, by making you crawl on your stomach, by calling you every name you can be called, from son of a bitch on down, and how dumb you are and how stupid you are. And this is to you down from being an individual to recognizing, to force you to recognize that there's something greater than you. And that's the organization you're assigned to, the squad, platoon. And that everything you do has got to be in concert with the other members of that group. And that your individual wants and needs are unimportant. This is the way to break it down. And they start out by giving you clothing that don't fit.
On purpose?
Deliberately.
Oh.
Yeah. Clothing that don't fit. They give you equipment, and particularly boots that are always too, shoes that were a little too big. They put you on a scale, and they put 90 pounds on your back, and you're barefooted. And of course your feet spread out when you get, and they draw a circle around that where your feet spread out, and that's the size shoes they give you. But they don't realize you're not always carrying 90 pounds on your back. But that's an example of how they work. Then they start training you with a rifle, how to break it down, how to disassemble. When I went in the Army, we had O3s. O3, yeah, Springfield O3 from World War I. Then, after about 4 weeks of basic training, we got the M1, the Oran. So now we got a new rifle, and we've got to learn how to fire it. But to show you how unprepared the American Army was for war, we had a rifle grenade launcher that would only work on an O3. It would not work on an M1. So squad leaders later had to carry an O3. The rest of the squads carried an M1, the Oran. But that if the squad leader lost his grenade launcher and nothing to shoot that would even knock out a Jeep, I'll get into that later. Then they took you on hikes.
How far typically?
And then when they start out a 10-mile hike, then a 15, then a 20, then a 25 with equipment in Georgia in April, May.
90, 100 degrees.
Yeah. And if you fall out, you've got to go back and do it again the next day or on Saturday or Sunday.
You as an individual?
You as an individual. They put the equipment on you and make you go to have people to check you to see if you do it. And if you goofed up, the slightest goof up, they made you wear a pack, full field equipment, everything you had, and then walk around the quadrangle, we called it. And you maybe have to walk 4 hours around it. And again, everybody's looking at you, and they know that you did something wrong. Maybe minor, but that's the way they discipline you.
Would people yell stuff at the person?
No. It's very funny. The other people realized that could very easily be them.
So they were sympathetic.
Yeah, they were sympathetic, yeah. But they didn't show sympathy. Sympathy, I learned this very quickly. In fact, I learned it very quickly in the Army. Sympathy is a word you'll find in the dictionary between shit and syphilis. So they told you that right quick in the Army. Both of those things are not very good. Don't play this in front of your mother.
Okay.
But that's the way the Army was. They were blunt and they didn't want to make a man out of you. They wanted to make a machine out of you. And later, when I got into combat, I realized how important it was to be a machine rather than a man. Because you must act instinctively. You must obey without question. You must do things that are unhuman. You're a damn fool would go get killed because some sergeant said go out there and get killed. Who the hell is this sergeant to tell you to go get killed? They've got to condition you mentally to be prepared to become a machine so that when the sergeant said, Franklin, go out there and do so-and-so, knowing that you're going to get killed, you get up and go.
Because you've been conditioned.
You've been conditioned
from day one.
You've been psychologically brainwashed. And those two, when I went in the Army, if someone would have told me those words, I'd say, how the hell do you spell it? I don't even know what you're talking about, But now, later, I know what they did. But they really brainwashed us, and it was necessary.
So you would say it was effective?
Very effective. Very effective. Now, the part that was not effective, now I'm going to move back to Africa. Okay. After we took Oran, which was we had some casualties, a lot of casualties. And the first thing that I will never forget, the first thing that most people did was throw unnecessary equipment away. Gas masks, gas masks they'd throw away. Anything that did not have, that you couldn't eat, sleep with, or kill somebody with, you throw it away.
Did they give you a desert kit or something?
No. When we left Scotland, this is how they fooled us. One day they would issue us a mosquito bar to go over us, a silk thing to go over us. And the next day they would give us a wool scarf. If we thought, well, we're going to, in fact, the rumor that we're going to Madagascar, and I had no idea where Madagascar was, but I knew it was in the south, if we had a mosquito bar. Then they issued us overcoats. Now, what the hell are you going to do with an overcoat in the same climate you use a mosquito bar? But this is the way they did it. And, of course, we threw the stuff away. Now, one thing we kept. The English come out with what they called a gas cape. And it was a plastic thing that, like a poncho, except it was bigger. And it folded up into a little round package about that wide and about that big around. You could roll it up and put it right on your belt. It kept you warm. It kept, and the purpose of this gas cape was if a German plane came over and sprayed mustard gas, like they did in World War I, this gas cape would keep this mustard gas from landing on your skin. This is gas cape. Well, we used it to sleep under. We used it for a raincoat. In fact, that's about all we kept. That's about all we had. We used it to keep us warm. It was one of the greatest things of World War II was that English gas cape.
And you received that from the British? Is that right?
Yes. The British issued it to the Americans, and they issued it to us.
And they issued it to you when you were on the ship before you got on the amphibious?
Yes. Then, after we took Oran, my company moved back to Legrand, a little town of Legrand. And we stayed there. In fact, I had to go over to the 64th Foreign Legion Regiment to teach them American machine guns for a week because we're going to give them American equipment. And I had to go to show.
What were they like? What was your...
The Foreign Legion?
What was your...
Well, we fought them on...
and they did put up some resistance.
They did put up good resistance. And they were capable, disciplined soldiers, again with poor equipment. Now, we also were capable, disciplined soldiers with poor equipment. But we did not realize how poor until we got to Tunisia, in fact, to Germany. We moved 1,000 miles from Oran to a place where my regiment first went, to a place called Assault up in Tunisia. And we were part of the French 19th Corps. The French were...
How did you get that one? How did you travel?
We traveled by truck, by walking. 2 battalions would go by truck, and 1 battalion would walk, and 1 battalion would go by truck, and 2 battalions, and we'd just alternated, overlap like that.
Was that difficult? I mean, was that hard to do, or was you, at that point, were you physically conditioned?
No, it was a normal mode of moving for infantry. Of course, when you're in a weapons company, and you're carrying a 58-pound tripod on your back, and you're carrying 2 boxes of ammunition, and you've got about 90, 95 pounds on you. You've got to be, some people have got to relieve you every once in a while.
So you're carrying more than the typical, more than
the weapons company carries more.
More than the rifle company.
Rifle companies carry less but quicker too. So, if you weigh, carrying a little more to live a little longer, it's worth carrying. Now, on the way, we were concerned about German troopers dropping and having us take the wrong road in the desert. Yeah. And of course we had mines to worry about, German mines. But other than that, and when we got up near Constantine sits up on top of a mountain. Beautiful, beautiful city when you're way off looking at it. The German airplanes came over and Stukas and Strafus and bombed us, but nothing serious. And then we got to Asalida, and we went into a holding position in Asalida. And now November, latter part of November, December, it comes and it's cold, and we had no equipment. We'd thrown our overcoats away because they're too bulky to carry. We did not have bedrolls at that time.
So what were you sleeping on?
Well, some of us stole from hospitals or any quartermaster truck that went by that we rode with. Those truck drivers had blankets, and we stole a blanket. Well, you have to steal. In order to exist in the infantry, you've got to steal. In fact, there's not a farmer from Africa through Sicily to France and Germany that I have not stole all their green onions and lettuce and tomatoes. Whatever they had that would grow, I'd steal it from them. Chickens, hogs, whatever, cows, anything, we'd steal. And we'd kill it and eat it.
The thing that you liked taking in North Africa was I've heard oranges. I've heard a lot about oranges and eggs.
We had a problem with honeydew melons. One time we ran up on a whole field of honeydew melons, not too far from a place called Mactown. And we all just went crazy over these honeydew melons because we're eating K rations and C rations, nothing fresh. And so anything fresh like a honeydew melon. But it gave us the worst Tennessee trots you've ever seen. And once you get on the front line and people are shooting at you and you've got to get up and go through another hole to defecate, you've got a problem. So you don't want the Tennessee trots, is what they call them. Of course, depends on where you're from. If you're from Colorado, they go Colorado trots or Georgia trots or whatever. Dew melons was a thing that I went. I don't remember eating many oranges in Africa. We just perhaps wasn't lucky and got near an orange grove. But the overall picture, let me carry you back a little bit. We were later, or initially, we were part of the American Second Corps. And the Second Corps had 3 infantry divisions, 1 tank division, armored division. It had the 1st Infantry Division, the 9th Infantry Division, and the 34th Infantry Division, and the 1st Armored Division. That was the American Second Corps. Now, they took the 16th Infantry, my regiment, and attached it to the French 19th Corps, which was part of the British First Army. So we received what they call 5-inch from the British Army through the French down to us. And it was a completely disorganized, screwed up affair. You cannot believe how ineffective an American soldier is when you issue him oxtail stew. What the hell do you do with a can of oxtail stew? We had no lighting. This is an example. Or a tin of biscuits. We used to C rations or K rations or D bars. A D bar was a candy bar. Well, we stayed in Asalida for the winter in the valley. And this was a holding position. Really, we were not very aggressive holding. That's the French 19th Corps was just on.
Who were you? Was that any opposite of your position, or
the Germans? The Germans, yeah. Directly in front of us was a part of the German 90th Light Division. See, the Afrika Corps had 4 divisions. It had the 10th Panzer, the 15th Panzer, the 21st Panzer, 90th Light Division. Now, notice the difference. We had 3 infantry divisions and 1 tank division. The Germans had 3 tank divisions and 1 infantry division because they're operating in tank country. But we are not that smart. Our high command, either they are not that intelligent or they are not wise enough to understand what is going on. Now, our army initially had the old M3 Grant tank. Now, I'm not sure you know what I'm talking about, but the Grant tank was the same chassis as the Sherman tank. But it had on the top turret, the turret that rotated all the way around, had a 37 millimeter gun. On the right of this chassis was a 105 ouncer that was about 100 mils right or left. It would only move like that. So you had to turn the whole tank around to shoot over here. It had a range of 5,800 yards.
How does that compare to the Germans? Not very good. Huh?
No. The Germans had what they called the Mark V, which had a 88 millimeter gun and a turret that rotated 300 that fired 21,000 yards. The 88 at grazing fire. It went boom, crack, just like that. That's how fast it fired. And our gun go boom, wow. It took it that long to go there. The velocity of the shell. So that tank, I don't know what happened to it. Then we got to Sherman. Now the Sherman had a 75 millimeter gun. Again, its range was nothing compared to the German 88. So when it come to a tank battle between the American tank and the German tank, it was no battle. It'd be like me jumping in the ring with Holyfield, just about the same thing. And that's what irritates me when this damn tank said, I'll take a tank and go fight while nobody was that stupid. Even him, and he was notoriously stupid. Even he was not that stupid. He knew he couldn't get within 5,000 yards of a German tank till he would be knocked out. Anyway, we got the
How does that make you feel, knowing that your tank?
It gives you a very inferiority complex. The one thing that an infantry soldier at that time was the word tank. Because we had nothing that would knock a tank out. And a whole infantry in a rifle company or a machine gun company, you could do nothing to stop a tank.
They hadn't trained you or given you anything?
They trained us to stay in a hole and let a tank run over us.
Stop it, right?
That's not going to do anything to the tank.
Yeah.
Hell, down in Georgia and in Pennsylvania, I've been in holes and had the tank run over me. That's not, the 8 pounds per square inch on the track, it ain't going to push your hole in because it doesn't have enough pressure to push your hole in, and it just runs over you. And the moment it's unpleasant, but that's not stopping a tank. Now they moved us back they moved us by night, and I'll never forget it. It was cold, and it was raining, and it was miserable, and it took us about 2 days and nights in a truck. I don't know where they got the trucks from. They brought the trucks. They had truck battalions. They brought them back. We moved back about 3 or 4 or 5 miles, walked back and got on trucks, and then we went back and down to a place called Kasserine. Now, in Kasserine, the Germans had Panzer Division. We had absolutely nothing that would stop a tank, and they run over us. I run with that machine gun until I couldn't run anymore. Machine gun away, and I run some more because they were in the valley and we were up in the hills, and they're shooting at us and we're running. Of course, they'd already broken through us. It's the Kasserine Pass. We suffered tremendous casualties there. We withdrew almost all the way to Tavessa, which was back in there.
How far would you say distance was?
40 miles at least. And then we reorganized, and then we got some tanks, and we got some Spitfire fighter bombers, and we went back and retook Kasserine Pass. We got some tanks to go with us.
It wasn't difficult to rally the troops after
No, because once we got to where the Germans were no longer chasing us and shooting at us, we stopped. There's no use in running in the mountains, actually. We were running in the mountain, and the tanks were down in the valley shooting at us. And once they stopped shooting at us, there was no use in running. We just all sat down and rested, and of course it was no trouble to get organized. A few people were missing, who were killed or wounded or captured.
So you didn't take your regiment take heavy casualties?
Yes, 16th took quite a few casualties. In fact, some of our people were taken prisoners. and were taken to Tunis and kept at Tunis. And later, when the British liberated Tunis, they liberated our prisoners. They came back to us. One of our battalion commanders, he and most of his battalion was captured, and they put him on a boat to go to Italy. And they mutinied, captured the boat, and run it up on the land. And they come back to the regiment. These boys were in the 1st battalion. I was in the 3rd battalion. So now we realize that these German soldiers were really good soldiers. Really, really fun. They had really good equipment. But the funny thing about it is later, I captured a German. And I talked to him about what he thought of us. And he said, if we had your equipment, we could whip the war. And I thought to myself, what the hell is he talking about? If he really knew how poor our, but he meant how much equipment we had. Not the quality of the equipment, but the quantity of the artillery. We had massive loads of artillery. Massive artillery we had, and the Germans, of course, didn't have that. Then, after Kasserine, we withdrew, or we were pulled back to either Macedonian or Corinthian fortress. And we stayed there a couple of days, and the whole division became the 1st Division again. They pulled the 16th out from under the 19th Corps, and they pulled the 18th, which had been down Fade Pass by itself. They pulled them back, and the 26th, which got really eat up in Kasserine, but they pulled them back, and we become the 1st Division again, under command of the 1st Division. No longer under the command of the French or the British Army. So the 18th was under command of the British.
Were you kind of relieved?
Yeah, it's a relief to get back under our command. And but this is to show you how really inefficient our senior headquarters was, because no commander is going to let his troops be broke up into the parts under command of other units. A good commander, if he's took the business administration and got a C, is going to know that he's got to keep his people where he can command them, where he can tell them what to do. He can't just give them away, We stayed there, and this is where Patton come to visit us, the idiot. And no one in the 1st Division, 9th Division, 34th Division, or 1st Armor ever cared anything about Patton.
Why was that?
Well, we knew he was a phony. He was an absolute phony. You can tell when you've been walking and fighting and going hungry and cold and hadn't had a bath on 4 months before, and a son of a bitch comes down with a necktie and his shiny boots and shiny belt and starts telling you how many Germans he's killed. Now, you've been up there doing the killing, and he's been back at some castle at Constantine, and he's telling you how many people he's killed and how tough he is. You can't bullshit a bullshitter. That's what I'm saying. And we were good folk. We knew what the hell war was about. But he tried to impress us with a pistol on his thing and gave us a speech about what he was going to do and all this shit. But I will say one thing. We jumped off from this old ruins, and we went into attack, and we took a town called Gasta.
What kind of opposition did you face? German opposition in Gassman?
In Gassman, it was an absolute picture-perfect coordinated attack. About 3 miles up west of Gassman is a wadi, which is a dried-up riverbed. We all assembled in that dried-up wadi. Tanks, infantry, everything. And here come our airplanes, 12 Spitfires. And they just knocked hell out of Gassman. And our tanks come out of that wadi, and our riflemen behind the tanks, walking behind those tanks, and the machine guns sitting back there firing overhead. I don't think we had 10 people wounded in the whole regiment. Absolute perfect attack. We get through Gassman, and here are springs, warm baths, where you can take a bath. Now, you got to remember, we hadn't had a damn bath since Scotland, 4 months before, 4 or 5 months before. We had scabies, we had lice, we had malaria, we had sores, we call it the African rot. We had sores on our body where we'd scratch and it become infected. And now here we are in these springs. Boy, that was worth dying for, these springs. And we took baths, and of course we had, the Red Cross issued you a little pad. They called it a Red Cross pack, and it had soap in it, and toothbrush, and toothpaste, and a razor. I forget what all they had. Little stuff that you needed. But without water in the desert, anything worth a shit, you gotta have water. Well, now we've got water in Gassman. So for 2 days we stayed in Gassman, bathing and cleaning up and living it up. We were in heaven. Then we move out, and from Gabes, the road goes directly to a place called Gassman to Gabes. Here's Gassman. Gabes sits on the coast. Now, the British Army is pushing the Germans north. And if we go and cut them off at Gabes, now they can't retreat up. See? So we're going along the road toward Gabes. Tanks, infantry, artillery, airplanes, everything.
Are you on foot yourself?
We're on foot, yeah. Machine gun.
Carrying all your 90 pounds.
And we go through a cut in the mountains into a valley called El Gatar. And of course the infantry gets in the high ground. Always, it's required. We go up in the high ground.
So you went up in the high ground?
We went up in the high ground, overlooking the valley. And of course the tanks stopped, and the artillery set up back there. And the battalion, the Aorta, I don't remember how you pronounce it, the King's Regiment of the Italian Army was defending these things. And we were fighting the Italians. These were probably the best troops. And they were good. That's why Rome put them there.
Did they fight?
They fought impressive. Yeah. Those Italians fought very effectively. They stopped us. The next day,
what did they do that was so effective? Was there something?
They had good fields of fire, which is, it's hard to talk to someone who's not a soldier. It would take me an hour, a good defensive position to go. But to explain as briefly as possible, you want to have grazing fire with all of your automatic weapons. Grazing fire means that the maximum ordnance of your bullets are no higher than 6 feet high. And any deflated position, which is more than 6 feet, you have this out for your mortars to fall into. Okay. Now, any big gullies or anything, you put mines in. You see, and this is what the Italians had done. The Germans had taught them how to do it. The Germans were excellent. They really knew how to set up a defensive position.
So the Germans did this pretty much standard.
Pretty much standard. Except for the American Army. We were not trained in defensive positions. We knew practically nothing except to dig a hole, set up your gun, and shoot. This is about what we knew. But this is what made the 1st Infantry Division so good, is that we copied the Germans in just about everything they did. We never attacked in daytime, because in Africa you couldn't. The minute you moved in daytime, the German airplane was on top of you, or the German or a German tank was shooting at you. You could only move at night. So we learned to attack at 3 o'clock in the morning. You hit what you call the IP, the initial point, at 2. And the LD, the line of departure, you cross at 3. and you go into the attack, and you go into attack in a column. And you go right into the enemy position, and then you spread out and take it from the rear. And we learned this from the Germans in Africa, the First Infantry Division. You can read the history of my regiment, and you'll find Colonel Gibbs or whatever colonel we had ordered an attack for the 3rd Battalion at 3 o'clock in the morning. Always at 3 o'clock in the morning. We always do that. Because this is when troops are the sleepiest. You know, you sit, if you're on guard, and you sit there until 12 o'clock at night. By 3, you're pretty well ready to go to sleep. And we found that out. And of course, we picked up a lot of tricks from the Germans on how to lay out mines, how to set up a good defensive position, how to use flares as signals, how not to use the radio. But the one thing that the Germans did not have was the fire direction center. We did not have it either. But some smarter than I realized that we had to have a fire direction center. Now, a fire direction center is some boys who are intelligent, who went to university and took mathematics, that can sit down and look at a map and say, well, the gun is here, and the target is there, and this Sergeant Franklin is looking, he's on this hill over here. Left for Sergeant Franklin is actually from the gun target line is short. And they could figure it out mathematically. I could pick up the phone, I could call the company and say, well, at checkpoint from point of, we used what we call from point of origin. From point of origin 3, right 25, left 25 is an enemy tank. Well, the Capital Fire Direction Center and say from so-and-so and so-and-so is an enemy tank. And they sat down and said, well, here we got a battery of guns here. They fire here, and they can knock it out. And it all went through Fire Direction Center. Germans didn't have that. We did. And we, not only could they fire one gun, they could fire 100 guns or 1,000 guns to one Fire Direction Center. Because they had some smart boys in there who knew mathematics. You don't learn anything else in college but mathematics. Learn that. Because someday it'll save some rifleman's life. We established that in Africa with the Fire Direction Center.
So that was established in Africa. That wasn't something that had been taught back at the trade. That was
established in Africa. Yes, the First Infantry Division.
The first Infantry.
That's right.
First to do, and it was called Fire Direction Center.
It was, of course, it's standard in the Army now.
Thanks to the first division.
It started with the first division.
So it sounds like to me that the American, that your regiment and division were really picking up quickly, learning very quickly from the Germans. Your own initiative is.
This is good. We got an order from division headquarters, which goes against all of the American philosophy as to how you treat soldiers. But we were having trouble with people running. You can't blame it. I had a 42-year-old man that had a wife and 4 children in my squad. And the Germans started shooting at us, and he got up and ran. He just lost control of himself. The order came down from division that anyone in grades sergeant and up could shoot him. Now, you don't do that in the American Army. That does not happen in the American Army division. And you think that word didn't get out to people who wanted to run? That if you run, this damn sergeant over here is going to shoot you. So don't run. You better, for sure, he's going to get you. Maybe the Germans might miss you, but he ain't going to miss you. A written order, too. Of course, I could never find a copy of it.
But you heard, David, were told verbally that this is the order.
Yeah. And they, and that copy, because it's a natural reaction for a human to try to run from danger.
Yeah, that's a key question. That's one of my key questions. I haven't been in combat, so I don't understand why don't people run. I know
they do. Most of them don't. Well, initially, everybody wants. But then you have people who you've been living with. People who have endured exactly what you have endured. people who have gone through the same thing that you were going through, and they didn't run. And you look at them, and they look at you, and if that son of a bitch ain't going to run, I ain't going to run either. Eventually, you form that cohesion where it's better to die than to let this friend know that you're a coward. This is what it boils down to, because we are all cowards. I have done the cowardliest things in the world, and it looked like I was doing it because I was brave. Absolutely not brave. I was scared. My ass was scared to death. No, as my daughter had said one time. She got D in mathematics. And I sat her down at the table and gave her a glass of wine. My family, we lived in France, and they were raised with wine for dinner.
Yeah, that's the tradition.
So, and it's nothing. They neither one of them drank or smoked. They sip wine or sip a drink. They don't smoke. I smoke and I drink, but they didn't. Fortunately, they did. But she said, I said, honey, why are you getting a D in mathematics? You're a smart girl. And your mother's a mathematician. She does it physics. So certainly you didn't take everything from me. You must have got something from her. And she said, well, Daddy, you don't realize the pressure we're under. And I said, just a minute, honey. Don't talk to me about pressure. You put a tank over there at 600 yards trying to shoot your ass off, and you're in a hole hungry and freezing and cold and nothing to eat, and shoot at your ass. Now you're talking about pressure. You're talking real stress when the tank is shooting at your ass. So don't ever come talk to me. Talk about something else. Say I'm dumb, I'm stupid. But don't talk to me about stress or pressure, because I know what stress and pressure is. And she didn't, but her grades went up immediately. No. She knew she couldn't be yes. But anyway, it is hard to say what distinguishes one human from another human in a given situation. Something that to you may not, even in your life, you've seen people, when a fight starts, hold the coat and the other one will do the fighting. You've seen that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And there are those people.
Sure.
There are coat holders and there's fighters. Well, it's the same damn way in the Army. You have coat holders and you have fighters. Now, this is good. I have no objection to it. But it always seemed that we had a system in the American Army that they took the poor Southern boy because of this is how they separated us. They took a certain IQ and you went to the Air Force. And if your IQ was 113 or above, you went to officers training. But if your IQ was 112 and down, then from there you went down to artillery, first Air Force artillery, tanks, and then when you got down to about 55, infantry. They put the dumbest ones in the infantry. Now, maybe they did this because they knew what they were doing. Because if you are not too intelligent, a one-eyed man is king. And all the officers were one-eyed. We were blind, and the officers had one eye. So we would have what's to do because our IQ was low. We did not have the benefit of an education. And this happened either purposely or accidentally. It happened that we got in the infantry. You got mostly dumb people, me included. Now,
but yet you guys picked up the German tactics.
That's right. That's right. But we had learned how to survive. As always, we went to work at 12 or 13, and my pay at age 13 was $1.25 a week, plus all the old vegetables and fruit that were no longer sellable. Sure, my family could live off of that. From 13 to 16, my family lived off of what little money I made, and the cabbage and bananas and things that they couldn't sell at the store I got. That was part of my pay. That's surviving. You learn to survive. And when you get on the front line, you learn to survive. Occasionally, you're required to do the unnatural in order to survive. In other words, if the enemy is coming at you, and if you don't stop him, he'll kill you. So you do what you can to stop it, which may be classified as being brave. It absolutely has nothing to do with bravery. Because the best, never back a coward up in a corner. You back a coward up in the corner, you've got a fight on your hands. You back a damn dumb rifleman back in a hole and threaten to kill him, and he'll come out fighting, I'll tell you. And that's what we did. We learned how to fight. We really learned how to fight. And people say, well, I've had a lot of people say, how come the 1st Infantry Division to be so good? We were so good because we learned from the masters, and the masters were the Germans. They had been fighting for 3 years, and we'd been fighting for 3 days, and they'd been fighting for 3 days. They were absolute masters at everything, particularly war. They are, can you believe I'm sitting on a hill in Sicily, and out in front of me, not only me, the whole people were sitting there in machine gun. Here comes a little toy tank. Comes up out of a creek bed where they had a little bridge over this creek. This little toy tank comes up out of that thing and comes across the field with us. And everybody's looking, hey, look at that toy tank. And somebody said, let's shoot it. So we all started shooting at it. And some bullet hit the firing mechanism, and it had 1,000 pounds of TNT in it. And it was remote controlled. The Germans were going to guide it up into our position and detonate it. Well, hell, we didn't even have a rifle grenade. And here they've got remote-controlled tanks, remote-controlled bombs. They could guide them. When they did that in Sicily, into one of our ships, they guided the bomb right into the ship. And we saw what masters they were at war. Luckily, we were masters at having more than what they had. There's an old saying in the 1st Infantry Division. God is with the 1st Infantry Division because we had more damned artillery than anybody else. That's why God is with us. If we told God wouldn't be with us, he'd be with the other people, But that's an old 1st Division saying. And we believed in using it. And we knew how to use it. A sergeant could pick up the phone and a whole battalion of artillery would fire a tank. Because we knew how to do it. Other divisions had no idea how to do that.
How to call it in.
They had no FDC. It was pathetic. But in the beginning, of course, we've always had the best artillery. We had the most artillery. Of course, you have to be careful. Our own artillery would shoot at us.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
How would that happen?
Oh, well, on Mother's Day of 1943 in Africa, we're on a hill, and our whole division artillery opened fire on us. And I'll tell you what happened. They were supposed to fire on this hill. Then we were supposed to attack the hill. Well, we sent out a patrol in battalion and found out that there's nobody on the hill. So the battalion commander, his name was Stone, said, well, let's get up there quick while the enemy is not on the hill. They've withdrawn. So we go up there, but the word didn't get back to FDC and back to the artillery. So at the time the artillery is supposed to fire, they started firing. And we're on the hill. And this time, another time in Germany, when we crossed the German border, we were the first to cross the German border on 11 September 1944. The first village we come to, my battalion is taking this little village in a column. My battalion commander is right behind their platoon, Colonel Horner. And we started getting 240. Excuse me. It's a roundabout like that. One of them will knock a house down. We're in this little village. And this 240 is landing on us. And the only reason I know this is I could hear the battalion commander talking in the radio. He's been very calm, very quiet. He's been with us so long. He said, Zebra, Zebra, lift your fire. You're firing in Blue Battalion's area. Just like he was talking to his wife about a dinner engagement. The same, just as quiet. Just Zebra, lift your fire. You're firing in Blue Battalion's area. Well, Blue Battalion, first battalion was red. Second battalion was white. Third battalion was blue. Red, white, blue. And so everybody knew what battalion. And we were just good troops, good soldiers.
That's one of the questions I'm really interested in. What makes, if you had to pick some things or characteristics, attributes, what makes an effective combat soldier versus an ineffective combat soldier?
First, you've got to realize that when a war is rumored, we always invoke patriotism and mother and apple pie and family values and a lot of bullshit that doesn't mean anything.
Initially, because you hear a lot about that.
Initially, it does. But once you get on the front line, once you get actually in combat, and this doesn't happen until not 2 months, you realize that there are weak people and there are strong people. And the weak people will fall by the wayside. I'm talking about colonels, captains, majors, sergeants. They will be relieved. People will take their place. And this happened, of course, this happens in all combat units. The people who are no good, you put them in a very stressful situation on the front line, and they will crack. Now, I don't mean to denigrate anyone who cracked, because after all, I would say it's human to crack. But you can't crack if you're a battalion commander. You can't crack if you're a company commander. This just don't happen. You've got to have somebody in there who is almost cool-hearted enough to think that you are one of his weapons to get this job done. And he uses you as one of those weapons to get this job done. Now, once you find them who is that callous, that uncaring, then you've got a combat leader. That does not mean that he does not care about your well-being. It only means that if he's told to take that hill, he will not hesitate in using you as his weapon to take that hill. First comes duty. Then comes personals, dislikes, wants, and so on. Now, they say a good leader will take care of his troops. Yeah, sure. But if everybody's hungry, what are you going to do? You're going to do without your food to give to him? If you don't have any, what the hell are you going to get him? Are you going to give him your blanket if you don't? Everybody is unhuman. Everybody has been graded to the status of an animal. He wants to survive, and to survive, you've got to do what the higher headquarters want you to do. And the cruelest part of this is some people justify their existence by getting other people killed. And we always understood this. And fortunately, machine gun companies, machine gun platoons, do not have to participate in this. There are 3 kinds of patrols. There's a reconnaissance patrol that riflemen go on. There is a combat patrol, and there is a contact patrol. 3 kinds of patrols. Most people on patrols get killed, get wounded, or get captured. Now, a reconnaissance patrol say, okay, then you and Todd go up that hill and find out what's out there. So you and I got to walk out there until somebody shoots at us. And then we got to say, well, there's a machine gun there and mortar fire is coming here. Now we got to get back and tell them. Well, you have a man sitting back at headquarters, regimental headquarters. His job every morning is to go to the colonel and say, well, the capabilities of the enemy, we have a battalion in front of us who has up team machine guns and blah, 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 blah. And his whole job is to tell the colonel what's out in front of us. Well, in order for him to know that, he's got to send you and me out there and find out what's out there. And that's called a recon patrol. And quite often you get killed. And if you and I get killed, then somebody else goes out to find out what's out there. Because that information is at regiment. Or a battalion. Battalion is the same way, they have an escalation. We always resented down in the infantry, headquarters people, because their sole motive is to justify their position by getting our asses shot on. And we never liked that. We always hated everybody that was behind. This is a half-truth. Because deep down, we really respect these people because of their intelligence. How can they say that, well, if you take a rifle company here and move it to here, how long is it going to take? And they know how long. I don't know that how long, you know. They're intelligent. If you got a rifle company here, they need so much ammunition. I don't know that. We got to have people in the city. So you really respect them for some things. But other things, you hate them for it. But to distinguish, to answer your question, I think it's an unanswerable question. It's almost unanswerable. The situation will dictate those who are true survivors. D-Day is an example. D-Day, two boys in my company, twin brothers. They were in a machine gun squad in the second platoon. They joined us in England before invasion. And there was absolutely nothing no way of saying, skinny little boys from Pennsylvania, nothing outstanding about it were leaders. Well, they ended up taking a church steeple up in Colville, Samur, and set up a machine gun, and a damn tank shot that church steeple down from around them, and they held up that tank and 6 German soldiers. They wouldn't let them advance, and both of them got the DSC. 2 heroes, but you had no way of knowing. But
never would have guessed.
That situation dictated that they were survivors. One of them got killed, by the way, but then the other one lived. And later he deserted. He just got up and walked off the front line, and we never saw him again.
Was that how common was that?
There was quite a few deserters. I'll tell you why. In Africa, we were really learning. We were really proud of what we were doing. And the next hill was an adventure, and the next hill was an adventure. And what was there? And eventually there's going to be an ocean. There is something. And then in Normandy, of course, we had prepared. And Sicily was quite different. Sicily was a very difficult on the individual. I went 37 days and didn't take my shoes off. My feet were rotting. And the whole company, at the end of the campaign, the whole company took off our shoes and rotten socks at the foot of Mount Etna and laid like that. And the battalion doctor come down with all his crew, and they painted our feet purple. They put that purple medicine on. A holding company, and a rifle company too, right at the foot of Mount Etna, and everybody's feet were rotten because we had walked from Gila to Mount Etna, never taking off our shoes. Really, it was tough. It was tough on the individual. But when we got to Normandy and went across France, and we really thought the war was over, and then we run into Germany, and it got tough, and colder, and wetter, and hungrier, and more people were killed, and eventually, with me one day, me and my buddy, we realized that we can't go on. Cannot. Eventually, look, we started out with 142 men, and now there's 4 of us. We had 8 at D-Day, and now there's 4 of us left. And people are just coming through. You don't know their names. You don't give a damn. They get shot and so on. Eventually, you're going to get it. And then you come to the realization that they're deliberately keeping you here. The Russian army, the German army, will take a whole unit and pull it off, fill it up with replacements, train it, and put it back up on the front line. But not the American army. They keep the unit on the front line, and they send in 1 or 2 people at a time. Now, can you imagine, and I give this some thought one time, can you imagine you're a young soldier, you get drafted out of Knoxville, you're sent to basic, train, you're sent to New York, you're put on a boat, not with friends, but alone. Now, remember, you're alone.
Did you make friends quickly, or was it hard to make friends?
Well, once you got to the front line, it was very difficult because people didn't want to become friends. Because they already had their little clique, and they knew you was going to get killed or something. But this is another thing different with the First Division. When a replacement comes to the First Division, he was assigned a man who was responsible for him. And that man taught him everything he needed to know. Now, when you went to another division, nobody taught you anything. You're just there. But the First Division learned from being on the front lines of that.
Was this a tradition in the 1st Division? This was just, you just did that because that was the way things were done?
Somebody in the realized that here's a lonely boy coming up. Maybe 4 of them came over together on a boat, and then one goes to one division, one goes to another division, another goes to another. And here this boy comes down, and generally they come at night. The company runner brings him up to your platoon at night. And here he is, and he doesn't know nothing. You know, and you can imagine how scared and lonely this person is. And in other units, you're just getting that hole. Not the 1st Division. 1st Division assigned a man to you who was responsible for you. And that man took you as his brother. And he taught you everything you need to know. And this is another way of making it.
So you probably then, you were assigned to?
Oh, yes.
So what was that? What, can you remember does any particular one stand?
No, because I later when I got up to be a sergeant, I didn't.
Then you
didn't have it. But when I was a young private in the PFC, I had people. And another thing, you don't have to turn over in a machine gun company that you do a rifle.
Oh, that's it.
Where we may receive, 10 replacements after a battle, the rifle company may need 40 replacements because they get cut. In a rifle company, you take a machine gun platoon is attached to a rifle company. We were with our company one time, and we were trying to take a castle. It's near a town called Hammack, up not too far from Solberg in Germany. And it took us a week to take that damn castle. Set up on top of the hill. The top of the hill was here, and the castle was here, below the crest. It was hard to get it with artillery, and we had to go uphill to attack it. They had perfect defense. Our company had 22 men left in it when we took the castle. Now we're talking 188 men. What a company should have, and they had 22. It's not unusual for a rifle company. Now, as I remember, my platoon, we were 27, 28 men. But that's a platoon, where our company is a company. So the turnover is there. But it's of course, to be a good soldier is an art also. There is an art to being a good soldier. He's got to know, and of course you find this in sergeants, good sergeants. He's got to know what likely route the enemy will use to approach you and what you should do to stop it. How can you put out a listening post? How can you put out booby traps? The 1st Division was the booby trapiest damn outfit you've ever seen. We never laid down in our head booby traps ever was. And when we got relieved, like in Chaumont, Normandy, we got relieved by the 5th Division. About half the 5th Division got killed running up on our booby traps because we got relieved at night. We didn't even know we were going to be relieved. We didn't have time to show them everything.
Were they homemade or were they?
Oh yeah, you take a grenade and you tie it to a tree. You take a string and put on almost all that. Put the string over here to another tree. Anybody walking by hits that string, pulls that pin, the grenade goes on. You take a mortar round, pull a pin, dig a hole, lay it down, let a tank run over it, it'll blow a track off. We learned all of that. And this I call the art of being a good soldier. Now, the art of being an offensive soldier is quite different from the art of being a defensive soldier. Because he needs to know about the defense. That it's a lot like football, It's two complete different entities. I hope I didn't confuse you, Tom.
Not at all.
You want another drink?
Sure.
Okay. I'm not boring you, am I? In Africa, the 1st Infantry Division got a tank destroyer attached to it, very close to El Guitar. Exactly when it was attached to us, I don't know. It had the old import chassis, but it had a 90 millimeter gun and an open top. It had no turret. 90 millimeter. And they call it M10 tank destroyer is what they call it. And that son of a bitch was destroyed. Now we're on equal footing with the Germans.
And this is by El Guitar that you're on equal footing.
But we had a battalion. Germans had 3 divisions.
So you're still not really.
Now the problem is the American production. Of course, again, I'm not intelligent enough to understand the wheels of production, but they were turning out 10,000 tanks a month. But they weren't worth the damn. If they would have turned out 10,000 M10 tank destroyers a month, we'd have ended the war 2 years earlier. You know, but I guess production can't just turn over, you know, like from M4 tank to M10 tank destroyer. Next thing.
What was wrong with the M4? What was it?
Gun was not picking up. Did not have enough muzzle velocity. The barrel was not long enough for it to carry very far. And it was not a very effective weapon as far as tanks go.
How did this, I'm just curious, I don't mean to interrupt, but how, from a psychological standpoint, I mean, it sounds like you're really, you're up against, except for your artillery, it sounds like except for the American artillery, which we had to be in numbers, it sounds like there's a sense of the Germans having the advantage.
Of course.
And how does that make you feel in combat?
It did not make you feel good. We came, and I forgot to mention something else. There, when the division came back together at that Corinthian old fortress, they finally come out with something that would knock a tank out. It's a 2.36 bazooka. That is where the first time we ever saw it, and they issued it to us.
No training. No training.
No training. Well, we just went out and shot it, and that had an old tank and shot the tank. And if you shot in the back of a German tank and hit the motor, you could knock it out. Into the treads of the tank, you could knock a tread off. That would make the tank turn around, become immobile.
You learned that by
That doesn't mean it still couldn't shoot at you, you know.
Oh.
It was a motor event. The Germans had a Panzerfaust, which every rifleman had one, you know, and that damn thing had a thing on that part. And I had an impact type of fuse that when it hit an object and the fuse was pushed, charge blew everything through where it hit. It didn't explode like our 2.36 bazooka. Our 3.2 bazooka would hit and it explode. But the German Panzerfaust would hit and explode through. It had what they call an impact type fuse. It's like dynamite. If you took a stick of dynamite and let it go off, it would just explode. But you can take it and lay it down on the floor and lay a magazine over it, one of those magazines, and it'll blow hell out of that floor. That's hard to believe.
Yeah, it is.
But it's true. Just a little bit of mud or a little bit of dirt on a stick of dynamite makes it blow down. But otherwise, it goes to where it can the least resistance, and the least resistance. But put something on top of it that makes it blow down. See? Well, that was the German Panzerfaust. It was an impact type, and the fuse detonated and penetrated through our tank. But the next thing, excuse me, next thing is when you're behind a tank, as a rifleman and a machine gun and into an enemy position, you have no way of communicating with the tank. No way. The tank is closed up.
I hadn't thought of that.
The tank commander, it has a little thing here he can see out there. But a rifleman behind him, or an infantryman, machine gunner, can see a German tank here, an anti-tank gun, but he can't tell the tank. So we tried to get him to put a telephone on a tank so that it talked to the commander. They wouldn't do it. They would not do it until the war was almost over. And tank destroyers came out with a bill and telephone so we could talk. But it took 3 years. How many German lives were saved by that lack of application of a sound thought, a sound idea? That's how stupid we were. We were, again, best at moving supplies in the world. Nobody can compete with him. We're the best at moving artillery and shooting artillery. Nobody can compete with We're the best at calculating everything, but we're the worst at getting information from the bottom up.
Why is that?
Well, you go to your school and see that your school institutions in America are top-heavy, and they absolutely refuse to accept excellent ideas from the bottom up. Right. They think they should originate from the top down. And unfortunately, like I'm not denigrating the intelligence or the intelligentsia of America, but unfortunately, some dumb riflemen have good ideas.
Well, it makes sense because the action's taking place. That's where the ideas will be generated that are realistic.
That's right. You've got it.
It makes sense to me.
Now, next thing. The Germans went into Poland September 1939. Their commanders on the ground had a pilot with them who had contact with the German Air Force. And Air Force, Stukas, what the bomb. You know how long it took the Americans to come up with this? Just in September of 1944. Now, we're in war from 1941. And in September 1944, I saw my first fighter pilot. Adolf, what are you doing? My first fighter pilot in an infantry battalion. In September of 44, we run into a column of German tanks trying to get back to Germany, and he knocked those things out with P-47. We had 36 P-47s over us about in 5 minutes, and they ate that column up alive. I'll bet you they killed 3,000 people and knocked out 20 tanks in 15, 20 minutes because he could talk to them. But it took us from 41 to 44 to land back. But we finally learned it. We're very slow learners.
There's just a bias, I guess, from ideas coming up from the.
I think so. There's an old First Division saying, it's not your job to question why. It's just your job to do or die. So, obviously, expect much from the ranks. But what we learned in Africa and Sicily, we spread among the ranks. We didn't necessarily spread it up to higher headquarters. We spread it among the ranks. You know, how to set up a defensive position, a booby trap position. There are three, Germans were famous for 3 types of defensive. They have the boat type of defense. They have the stationary type of defense. And they have the stop defense, the defense that absolutely stops you. And if you go along in a column, particularly with tanks, and they wanted to stop you and not let you go this way, they put a few anti-tank guns up there, a couple of tanks, and say you stop, you've got to deploy, spread out, get your fire going, call artillery and all this stuff. And they hold you up, they delay you. And then they fight you until you overpower them. Then they had what they called the boat position. And they'd set up a couple of machine guns and maybe one tank or an anti-tank gun. And when you run up it, they would start firing at you. And the minute you start firing, they just boat out back 1,000 yards and set up another position. See, this is their boat position. Then they had their stationary defense, where they laid it in by the book. And when you hit a stationary position, you had problems, always.
Did you
because they were masters at because they learned that in Russia. Most of the people that we fought in Africa had fought in Russia and Poland. So it's like any other field of endeavor. The more experience you have, the better you become.
What would you say, Mr. Franklin? What would you